Bonjour, mes chers collègues. It's a perfect day to introduce myself. It's a snow day, and I'm finally showing you who I am. Some of you have already met me virtually, but I think most of you have not. So, I'm connecting with you because I have a funny feeling that the core French teachers are finding it challenging to locate material for Black History Month. All hope is not lost. There's material out there, maybe not accessible, but I'm going to tell you how to find it. You may have figured it out already. I am on a mission to make core French conversations simple for you and for your students. So I'm going to share 3 books with you that I believe will make Black History Month simple. When February rolls around, you can pull out these 3 books and get your curriculum going, get your students engaged, and enjoy the process. Okay, so how will these 3 books simplify the process for you? Well, they're 3 short stories about 3 children who, though living far from their ancestral home, they kind of share the joys of being in Canada. And so I think this will be awesome for you, for your students. It's a great way to inform your students about the African diaspora. Some people say diaspora. I'm never really sure how to pronounce that. However, forgive me if that's not the way you pronounce it. But these 3 books will give you the tools that you need to share Black history in a fun and simple manner. Yes, I know I'm a little bit late. This video should have come out probably at the end of January, maybe at the beginning of February, but hopefully I'm still on time. Okay, so these 3 books that I'm telling you about will enable your students to engage, interact with simple core French vocabulary and get a sense of what it's like to be an individual in the African diaspora, whichever word you want to use. So we've established that I'm a little behind schedule, and we're coming to the second week, the end of the second week of February. How are you going to breeze through 3 books for Black History Month in your junior intermediate core class, especially with your grade 4s? Simple, simple, simple. So these books come in 2 formats. They come in hard copy on Amazon, ebooks on Teachers Pay Teachers. In the ebook format, I think this is just like the greatest way to get this done. And I have to thank a colleague of mine who suggested that I write my stories and make them accessible in ebook format. I hadn't been doing that prior to last year. So once you have them in ebook format, you just project them on your screen. If you have a smart board or a whiteboard or some kind of screen, you'll project the books on the screen and start out with not reading. So you're not going to ask your students to read at all. You're just going to ask them to skim through the pages as you scroll, of course, slowly so that they can see and that they have time to process what's scrolling in front of them. But you're going to ask them to look for words that they could use if they were creating a je me présente assignment or project or activity. That's all you would be doing for step 1. And literally that might take 10 minutes. So the next thing you would do is you would ask your students to look for words, vocabulary words, that would fit into a ma famille unit. So that's all they'd be looking for, just words that they would use to incorporate in a ma famille unit. Hopefully you've already covered that. If you haven't, then this part might be a little bit trickier, but not impossible. You could kind of go backward and do a crash course on ma famille and then ask them, okay, do you see any words in this book or in this story that you could use in a ma famille unit? So the third stage in the process would be for you to ask your students to look for les mots familiers and les mots amis. Okay, so they're looking for familiar words and word friends. By this point, you'll probably have all your students engaged because they're going to realize, wait a minute, we're reading a picture book. We recognize the vocabulary. We know what this all means. So this is where you have them hooked, they're engaged, and now they're going to be looking for les mots familiers, les mots amis. You could have them think about it independently, turn to an elbow partner, think pair share. I don't know if we still use that strategy. That's something that I learned way back in Teachers College. They might work in groups. So you can decide how creatively you want this process to take place. But I'll tell you honestly, you could get this all done in one lesson. You could technically get through one of the 3 books in one lesson. Keeping in mind also that as you're scrolling through on the screen, the students would be seeing the pictures, the illustrations that go along with the words, and they would start to pick up on clues and information connected to the African diaspora. Okay, so without you even telling them anything at this point, they'd start to pick up on, what's going on in the story. By going through this pre-reading process, you would already engage your students and you would already deliver that message that, yes, you can read these books. And these are the type of books that we would call comprehensible input, where the students understand the vocabulary in French and it's just a level above their language skills or their reading skills. But they would start to realize, wait a minute, we can read these books, and that sense of accomplishment is where you want them to be, because at this point you can say, okay, now you can read with a friend, partner, or in groups. Here's your copy of the story. Read through it and tell me, what is this story about? And that's the key with comprehensible input. You're giving the students the tools that they need without necessarily decoding everything for them. As an individual of Afro-Caribbean descent, I struggled with how I would present information to my students without making it too heavy, without making it too historical, and keeping in mind that the African diaspora is vast and the history behind each country's story, I guess you could say, is so dense that I just could not figure out, okay, how am I going to present this information to my core French students, especially grade 4s and 5s, maybe 6s too, just too heavy. And after experimenting a little bit last year with my students, I realized, okay, I could present them a story through the voice of a child. And I realized that it worked. So if it worked for me, I'm sure it will work for you. So that leads me to the point which you probably already picked up on from reading the email. I actually wrote these 3 stories because I have experience in these 3 areas. Okay, one of the stories is called Je m'appelle Judas, and he is from Jamaica, Jamaique. My family is from Jamaica. The other story is called Je m'appelle Oluwatobi, and he is from Nigeria. I was inspired to write that story because we had a new student come into our class last year from Nigeria who just struggled to feel like they fit into the context of the classroom. So I thought, let me write this story and help this individual feel like a part of the classroom. The other story that I wrote, the third one in this bundle, is Tes boucles sont parfaites. And why? Because, you see my little curls? I never felt like my curls were perfect. And I always wanted to have hair that was different than the hair that I have. And so I don't want to give away too much of the story, but you probably already picked up on the fact that this little girl in the story had issues with how she appeared to others. So I am certain that your students will enjoy the stories because they can relate. And every student in your classroom has a story. So what I'm hoping you'll be able to do from this point when you introduce the stories is that you'll be able to have your students create their stories. Use these Black history stories as a springboard for their story. So they recognize, we all fit into this framework and we all have a history and we all come from different places. My family is of mixed ancestry, but visibly I'm of African descent. However, the list is long, the many places that my ancestors are from. And so I just felt like, oh my goodness, I need to write stories that involve everyone while still teaching this concept of Black history, this very big concept of Black history. So I'm hoping that you will find these stories entertaining, interesting, and that these stories will make you feel comfortable presenting Black history to your classroom year after year after year. So as I mentioned before, I have the hard copies available on Amazon, and then I have ebooks available on Teachers Pay Teachers. Now, if you missed my little invitation on our Core French Teacher Facebook group, I had invited teachers to email me and reach out if they needed material for Black History Month, because I was giving away a bundle for free. This is just a portion of it. This is not the entire bundle, but it's passed. However, what I'm doing is I'm launching a sale. So I'll just reduce the price of the ebooks. If you're interested, they're on TPT. I'll make sure that the link for TPT and Amazon, those links are in the description, and I will make sure they're in the email as well. So wishing you a happy Black History Month. And once again, I hope that this simplifies it for you, that you just have a fabulous time, and also that you'll share your story and share where you're coming from, share your history in a fun way. Because I always say, if the students can relate to us, they'll open up and they'll start to talk. And that's what makes Core French conversations simple. I almost forgot to mention that I'm tagging on some questions at the end of this video. So I'll tag them on in French. You can translate them into English if you want. If you want to present them to your students in English, that's great too. But I'm going to tag them on in French, and they're just pre-reading questions. They could be post-reading questions, but I like asking questions like these at the beginning because it kind of forces the students to engage in the story and to pay attention as they are reading. So stick around for a little longer. This video is going to extend just a smidgen longer, and I will have the questions written there. So you'll see the questions, and I'm also going to voice over. All right, have an amazing, amazing, amazing snow day if you have one. But if not, then just have an amazing day. And it's a pleasure meeting you virtually.
Combien de tribus y a-t-il au Nigeria? Pourquoi penses-tu que Curly Girl veut des cheveux raides? De quelle couleur sont les yeux de Curly Girl? Quel est le sport national de la Jamaïque? Le Nigeria a-t-il un sport national? Quel est le plat national de la Jamaïque? Quel est le plat national du Nigeria? Nommez quelques célébrités jamaïcaines.